Hey, it's Steve. Real quick before we begin, the single biggest thing I've learned about succeeding as an ADHD entrepreneur is that everything boils down to mastering your weeks. So if ADHD is making business harder than it needs to be, I've got something that can help. Grab my free weekly ADHD dashboard. It's a free, simple, but powerful tool to help you stay focused, organized, and in control of your week. The link is in the description below. Hey there, Steve August here with another episode of ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. And today I've got a more personal episode for you, and one I think that is also hopefully going to be helpful for you as you navigate life, the ups and downs in life with ADHD. So getting right into it, last Thursday, I woke up to a message from somebody I knew who let me know that one of my old good friends from college, had passed away at 57 years old, and it was a blub, and had an entirely different plan for the day. So I found out first thing in the morning and went through what you do when you get news like that. You start at, asking for information, how it happened, what happened, and details are unclear still. But it hit hard, right? Somebody I'd known in the part of my life that, how do I like to say it, where I was becoming me, the me that I am today. And there's, as we go through life, there's only a certain number of friends that we have that knew us while we were becoming us, before we are who we are today. And those friendships, mean so much. And to lose somebody who was part of that time in my life was hard. In some ways, it feels like you lose a little bit of connection to that time. You go through that initial shock and the sadness that hits. And I'm struggling here to talk about this with ADHD, but I think it's also really important, because some of the stuff that I'm talking about, in terms of grief, can be a real challenge to executive function. Well, that's true even if you don't have ADHD, right? You lose somebody in your life, or life sets you really hard in some way. You have intense emotions. It doesn't matter if you have ADHD or not. You're gonna be derailed. Um, so I don't want to make this just purely about ADHD, but I think it's important to note that with an ADHD brain, we're already working from, having to work harder to maximize the executive function we do have. We're working harder to stay emotionally regulated, and it's harder for us to re-regulate after we deregulate. So, well, I don't want to, say, you know, hey, neurotypical brains don't experience this. Of course they do, but for ADHD brains, the floor drops a little further. What I really tried to do was be aware and let it flow and give myself some grace, and this is one of the things of being an entrepreneur, is that we do have a little more latitude to control our schedules and deal with things. And so I had a pretty ambitious day of big work, deep thoughts, deep thinking, big launch to work on. And I knew right from the get go that I wasn't going to be able to focus at all on that stuff. So what I did is, because I was sort of walking around in a daze, is I just acknowledged it, that I knew that my brain was going to be processing this stuff and it wasn't going to be able to settle in and do really, really, really focused work. And so what I did was I just did the easy stuff. I just did the reactive stuff, the stuff that didn't require a ton of executive function. It just, did the things, showed up for the people I needed to show up for. I hosted my co-working that day and, just adjusted, but gave myself grace, because I knew that if I really tried to sit down and focus on really hard things or deep things, the time wasn't going to be spent. I might as well go out for a walk at that point. But I stayed as productive as I felt like I could. And I really think that awareness is so key. once you start seeing the patterns of your ADHD brain and you understand the things about executive function and emotional regulation and all the things that come with it, the working memory really takes a hit as well. Um, then you can't unsee that. And in every situation that you come into, and life, right? Life's for all of us. We all have times where we're going to get challenged, we're going to get emotionally hit, and knowing how our brain's going to react and what it's going to need is so, I think, such an important thing. And I look for tips and tricks about, okay, what do you do with an ADHD brain with grief? And, there isn't really a handbook there, really. Like, everybody's got to process however it is that you need to process. But if you have that fundamental awareness of, hey, here's what my ADHD brain is likely to do with this, it's not going to make the grief any better, but it'll give you the room and the space to create for yourself and the permission to navigate it the way you really need to. So I don't have any magic tips or frameworks or something to offer. I didn't really find a clean answer for that because grief isn't clean. Really, it is messy, right? And that's okay, right? That's part of being human. So the thing that I think is really important though is the reason I felt like I could give myself the space and the grace uh, for switching my schedule around uh, was not just understanding my brain, but having worked in my system for a long enough time that, with all the co-working and with the weekly cadence and being able to navigate my weeks and create progress each week, is that I had a buffer, right? I had a buffer that I could say, okay, I'm not pinned on the red, that everything's going to fall apart if this day doesn't happen the way I imagined it to. That I can give myself the permission and time and space without letting anybody down, including myself or other people, because I had worked ahead to create that buffer and had been consistent over time. And that is really, I think, the biggest thing is life doesn't magically smooth out when we, achieve whatever it is we want to achieve. Like, life's gonna life, right? Things happen. So it's all our creating our foundation, creating the firmest foundation that we can create for ourselves with whatever brain we have. In my case, it's an ADHD brain. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is the daily kind of maintenance, the weekly progress, the working with your brain and the being aware of your brain and how it works and what it's going to need is, the heart of everything. And if you have that, you can navigate almost every situation. So I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. Appreciate you all listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time.